Now, with the budget less than a week away, there are lots of questions this morning on who and what will be facing in terms of tax rises. Well, James Murray, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, I need to practice that. Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury is here with me. Very good morning to you. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. First of all, I want to kick off with the Chancellor's announcement yesterday that she's going to change the debt rules. Before the election, though, she had promised that she wouldn't, as she put it, fiddle the figures to get different results. So it's quite a change of heart, isn't it?
Well, no, look, these fiscal rules the Chancellor has been setting out are in line with what we promised in the manifesto, and there are two rules. The first rule is the stability rule, which focuses on day-to-day spending, so saying that in future day-to-day spending will be entirely paid for through tax receipts, so no borrowing on day-to-day spending. And that sits alongside the other one, which is the investment rule, which says we'll get debt falling as a proportion of GDP while supporting responsible investment to help get the economy growing.
But you didn't say in the manifesto you were going to change the definition of debt, did you?
Well, look, we were very clear in the manifesto that we had these two rules, and the first rule, the one about getting day-to-day spending in balance with tax receipts, was going to be a change from the previous government. It was going to be, a tough rule. It was one that will bite hard, bite first. And it's actually one that means that the decisions in the budget will be difficult when it comes to taxation, spending and welfare. But that stability, those foundations are crucial to get the investment, to get the economy growing.
Well, economists have calculated that this rule change could give you an extra £50 billion plus to spend. Can we expect that amount of extra spending when we get the budget next week?
Well, you have to wait for the Chancellor to set out her budget next week, and she'll set out.
I'm not asking for the
figures.
Details of what will be in it, but just in terms of the amount
you're
of spending.
That's quite a big detail you're asking me for there, and obviously that's something the Chancellor will set out in the budget next Wednesday, and she'll set out the full details of these fiscal rules. But I think the important thing, if you think about the sort of two sides of the equation, number one is having day-to-day spending in balance, so tax receipts pay for day-to-day spending, but on the other side, making sure you've got debt falling as a share of GDP whilst investing responsibly to get the economy growing.
Give me an idea of what that kind of investment looks like. What are the priorities? Where's that money? What kind of projects is it likely to go on?
So obviously all of that will be decided in due course, and it will be overseen by the Office of Budget Responsibility and the National Audit Office to make sure those investments are responsible and deliver value for money for taxpayers. So we've got our industrial strategy, which sets out some of those sectors that we want to boost in terms of life sciences, digital, clean energy, and so on. But those decisions are ones that will be taken, by people who are overseeing the value for money aspect of the investments, because we want to put those guardrails in place to make sure that any investments are value for money and deliver a return for the taxpayer.
The former Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has said that the consistent advice he got from Treasury officials was that increasing borrowing meant that interest rates would be higher for longer and would punish any families that had mortgages. Do you accept that's a risk?
Well, look, the previous Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, had a very different approach to the economy. And in fact, our stability rule about making sure day-to-day spending is paid for through tax receipts is something the previous government never even attempted to do.
But you've changed the other rule, though, haven't you?
Well, the previous government never even attempted to get day-to-day spending into balance. And what we're saying is that investment is necessary in the future to make sure we get that private investment in as well, to boost the economy. So
you said there's no risk of higher interest rates as a result of increased borrowing under your new rules?
Well, I would say that what we're doing is actually about making sure that mortgages, taxes, prices are as low as possible in the long run. Because if you can get the economy growing, then you put the economy and people's livelihoods in a better position, and that's what we're doing. If you think about how the markets might look at what we're saying, what the markets will see next Wednesday when the Chancellor stands up in the House of Commons, they will see someone who's saying, we are not going to borrow for day-to-day spending, we're going to get debt falling as a share of GDP, and we're going to put in place guardrails about investments to make sure they're delivering value for money. Now, all that will give the markets confidence, and it will mean that we can get the economy growing to make people better off.
Will certainly be interesting to see how the markets do react. In the meantime, in the budget, you've promised that there won't be tax rises on working people. Our political editor was asking the Prime Minister last night to define what a working person was, or perhaps more importantly, who didn't fall into that definition. How would you define it?
I think a working person is someone who goes out to work and who gets their income from work. And that's what the Chancellor has said, as well as the Prime Minister. And in our manifesto, we made clear that we would protect working people, and we made our specific commitments in relation to income tax, national insurance and VAT. And that's a commitment we're keeping going into the budget next week.
What if someone gets their income from work, but they also get their income perhaps from a few shares or from some property? Do they count as a working person?
Well, we're talking about where people get their money from. And so working people get their money from going out to work. And it's that money that we're talking about in terms of those commitments we made around income tax, around national insurance. That's what's important, is to focus on where people are getting their money from going out to work. And I think that, if you look at the budget overall, I think we need to be upfront and say there will be difficult decisions when it comes to taxation, spending and welfare, but that is in everyone's interest to get the economy on a stable footing, boost investment and get growth up.
But just to clear up, if someone's watching and they say, I do get my income from work, but I've also got an ISA and I've got a few shares, not worth a huge amount, should they be worried come the budget?
Well, look, I think the whole country going into the budget will have to understand there are going to be difficult decisions. And I think that everyone knows this is not going to be an easy budget. Everyone knows this is going to be a budget where there are difficult decisions on, as I said, spending, taxation and welfare. But I think what people also need to know is the reason why we're taking those difficult decisions is because of the prize ahead of greater investment, of greater growth, of making sure that people are better off. That's why we're doing it. That's why we're taking these difficult decisions now.
Sir Keir Starmer was speaking in Samoa, where he is at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. There have been calls there for him to address the issue of reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade. He said that paying reparations is not on the agenda. Would the government be open to non-financial reparations?
Well, look, you're right to say that the Prime Minister's made clear that we're not going to make financial reparations. I think he also said, we should also be clear that the slave trade was abhorrent and be very clear about that as well. And what he's been focused on and we're focused on as a government is working together about the challenges we face in the future. So whether that's climate resilience, whether that's trade between our nations, that's our focus with other countries in the Commonwealth.
And I do want to ask you about the smoking ban as well, because back in the summer, the Prime Minister said that the government was considering a ban on outdoor smoking in places like pub gardens potentially, or outside nightclubs or restaurants. Is that going to go ahead or not?
Well, look, there's been a comment in some of the papers this morning. I'm not going to comment on leaks. What's important for us is making sure that through our tobacco and vaping bill, we tackle some of the real problems that smoking and indeed vaping cause. Smoking, I think the problems are well known, and we need to make sure that we tackle that, particularly amongst young people. But I was shocked to see the statistic that a quarter of 11 to 15-year-olds have vaped in the last year. So there's a real issue in terms of vaping for young people, and that's why the tobacco and vaping bill will tackle that as well.
So you said you didn't want to comment on leaks, but has a decision been made about whether or not there's going to be an outdoor smoking ban?
Well, look, the reason we're having this conversation is because of leak, and I'm not going to comment on that.
So we've just got to wait and see whether or not it's policy or not.
What I can set out is what is our policy that we set out already, and that's in terms of making sure that young people don't start smoking. And we also tackle this huge rise in vaping amongst young people, which I think is really concerning because it's getting young people addicted to nicotine products at a very early age.
OK, well, James Murray, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Thank you.